Walking up the now slightly more familiar corridor of the girls' dormitories, I can hear the faint sound of laughter coming from up ahead, and I instinctively assume that I am being mocked. It doesn't take long to identify the source as Lily's room, though the deep timbre of the female voice unmistakably belongs to not her, but to her sister. I rap my knuckles on the door with the usual 3 light taps, my hand barely retreating as the door swings open. Like an absolute mad woman, my goodness. Hey, Sal. Hey. Hello, Lily. Hanako. Hey, they be chillin' as they do. Hanako looks up tentatively, her hands buried in her oversized pink nightgown. From her side, Lily turns sideways towards the direction of my voice and smiles, as I would hope she would. It would be a flagrant lie to say I dislike the sight of her in those pajamas. I catch Akira giving me a sidelong look with a knowing grin, to which I reply with a sharp glare. Don't you be sassing me, Akira. Although I imagine that means that she is in the know and okay of it. She takes the hint, shrugs, and walks back to the low table in the center of the room. As I go to join her, Lily gives me a nod of greeting and starts pouring me a cup of tea. It's nice to see you again, Hanako. You've been getting around recently. Lily wears a look of concentration as a light brown liquid, carefully measured by her finger as always, flows from the teapot into the cup. Seems Hanako's taken up helping one of those people in your class with the newspaper club. Naomi, I think, have you now? Hanako gives an affirmative nod. Well, that's awesome. Even after spending about 2 months in the class, I still have trouble remembering the names of those students I rarely talk with. It takes a few mental contortions to connect the name with a face, but I eventually remember the girl that sits beside Hanako at the back of the class. Naomi Inoue, maybe. A fairly average-looking girl, except for her bleach blonde hair. Given her upbeat and straightforward personality, Naomi may have seen an opening to poach Hanako for her club when she inquired about joining one. Either way, it's nice to see Hanako broadening her horizons. It actually legitimately is. That's super great. When I first met her, the idea of her joining a club with anyone but Lily would have seemed utterly laughable. That'd explain how busy you've been. Enjoying it? It's really interesting. As always, Hanako's far from being talkative. Some things never change, and it seems that Hanako's personality is one of them. She'll likely always be one to shy away from being overly social, and that's okay. Warned by the sound of crockery against the table as Lily gently places my drink in front of me, I thank her and take a long sip. Hanako and Lily are attending to their own, and Akira is quaffing a mug of strong-smelling black coffee. The stonky stank is emanating all over the place. You're a lucky guy, Hisao. I can't help grimacing at her teasing smile, still visibly around the edges of the mug pressed to her lips. Seeing my sister in her pajamas. There's a lot of men out there who'd like to be where you are. I've seen a lot more of her than that, not that I'd admit it. Akira! Hey, I'm just teasing, as is what known to be done by an older sibling. She leans over to me as much as she can, whispering with a sly grin written on her face. And Hanako too, you perv. Hey, it was her idea. We both look over to her face turned to the ground and her hands fidgeting in the lap of her nightgown. If it's Sal, I don't mind. Okay. Good to know. Oh, well, this could be bad. I know Hanako's altogether too innocent to bother reading too much into such a thing, but the expression Akira directs at me is positively stormy. I've never seen that face from Akira before. Akira, please? It seems Lily can sense Akira's sudden change in aura just as well as I, even without seeing it for herself. Akira slowly looks away from me like an attack dog leashed by its owner in the nick of time. I breathe a sigh of relief. I can't think of a more appropriate time to try and change topics than around now. If you don't mind me asking, Akira, what do you do for a living? I've never seen you out of that suit. Thinking about what to do with yourself after school's over, eh? Well, yes, but also interested in general. A lawyer? For the most part, I work in the legal department of the Japanese branch of our family's company. The most boring possible answer, I suppose. Law's a pretty dry topic to most people. Kinda. Oh, you're not supposed to agree! Lily gives an amused giggle while holding her teacup and saucer, Hanako quickly joining her. This friendly atmosphere between everyone is something I'd missed while Lily and Akira were on their trip. But the dealings I had with Hanako didn't help. I think just not having Lily around changed the mood. It's nice to be back. I missed you, Hisao, and you too, Hanako. Same goes for the both of us. I'm guessing your classmates were happy to see you back. In a manner of speaking, yes. Akira's amused snort shows she's well aware of Lily's attitude towards such figures of speech. I imagine she'd have to be, given how long they've been together. Did you have fun in Scotland? For a moment, I wonder why she's asking, it having been quite a while since they came back, but then I remember everything that happened. We'd simply not had time to look back, what with the exams and our Hokkaido trip. Lily's face goes distant for a moment, and the fact that Akira's first reaction is to look over to her sister doesn't escape me. Nonetheless, she quickly collects herself. It was nice. I hadn't met our family in such a long time, so it was a wonderful reunion. Yeah, I guess that's right. Their house being beachside was the best part, though. From her dismissive tone, I get the feeling Akira doesn't like their family as much as Lily does. You only like that because you finally had time to play around. Just because I'm the better swimmer. I don't take after the athletic side of the family, that's all. Well, you can take heart in the fact that you got the height genes, at least. And the bus genes. That's not really the kind of thing to say around others. Though Lily pretends to scold Akira, she does so with an unmistakably slightly cheeky grin on her face, as if mildly proud by that fact, regardless. I doubt Akira really minds that, judging from her nonchalant expression. Well, I don't either. Hanako's looking down and blushing furiously beside me. The sisters' antics aside, their parents really do lead a fancy lifestyle. It seems utterly divorced from the life that Akira and Lily have lived until now. I suppose practicality must have made the decision for them. To have come from such a wealthy and well-connected lineage only adds to the almost noble air Lily seems to have, though it's a small wonder none of it seems to have rubbed off onto Akira. They really are like a little alike as siblings could be. The only similar seems to be their shared confidence, which can be both endearing and a headache at times. Well, that and their hair color. You can't say that's not a thing. Most of the night continues much the same, with Hanako eventually leaving the Satou sisters and me to ourselves as she heads back to her dorm room for a rest. She needs a nap! For a while, only the barely audible sound from Lily's teacup and saucer can occasionally be heard as she slowly drinks. The silence is strained as Lily and I wait for the elephant in the room to be addressed. So, Lily dutifully puts her cup down, giving her sister her undivided attention. With Lily and me on one side of the low table and Akira at the other, this almost feels like a judge passing down a verdict. I hear that you two are going out now. I glance sideways at Lily to confirm her as the source of Akira's knowledge. She gives a gentle nod to Akira, which I mirror in affirmation just to make sure that it's okay. Deciding that this is the proper time and place to do so, and Akira being the closest figure to a parent Lily's had for much of her life, I bow deeply with my hands on the floor before me and my head very nearly the same. I'll take good care of your sister, Akira. I promise you. See? He's a lovely young gentleman. She must have heard my voice coming from a lower position than usual. I slowly bring myself back up, and my eyes tentatively looking to Akira from under my brow. To tell the truth, I very much doubt my suited judge will raise any objections. She's very definitely the type to make her disapproval with others well known, something that lends her a measure of respect in my eyes. The old-fashioned kind, huh? Well, he's the kind of person I'd guess you'd go for. I don't have a problem with it. Wish you two the best. Even if I didn't like it, I couldn't really do anything anyway. I offer a nod of appreciation to her as Lily gives a small sigh of relief, likely more out of duty than actual belief Akira might have any problems with us being together. I do wonder, though, how's the rest of the family taking it, particularly the part residing at Yamaku? Have you told her? Smiles turn to grimaces as Akira grins downright evilly. The closest know-how to twist the knife best, after all. Putting up with it may be the best term for the situation. Don't you agree, Hisao? That sounds about right. At least she's being reasonable about it. Good to know. That girl can be a handful at the best of times. We sent a few messages back and forth during and just after the trip, and she was already busting my chops for seeing my boyfriend when we came back. After leaving Hideki for so long, she really does care for the little guy. I cast my mind back to Shizune's odd reaction after telling her about our relationship, but decided not to bring it up. It's no doubt simply born of their mutual antipathy. I don't know. And Akira's comments only back that up. Well then, that's settled. Gotta get back to work early tomorrow, so I'd better be off. She rises from the table with a grunt, her hand on her knee to push herself up. I just noticed Akira's eyes lingering on Lily for a couple of seconds before turning away as she begins to take her leave. As she walks out the door, she stops and looks up thoughtfully before turning to us one last time. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to tell you. Well, that does sound like the type of thing that she would say, wouldn't it? Yeah, alright, use protection every time. I gag violently on the tea in my mouth, contrary to my own. Lily's composure holds perfectly as she seems entirely unfazed. I'm kind of impressed. We are, don't worry. Atta girl. See yous. That is a chill-ass sister you got there, Lily. And with that, she turns and strides away. A hand held high, she disappears into the darkened hallway, closing the door behind her. Welp. The most reaction I can muster is flopping forwards onto the table, completely drained of energy and truly exhausted by her. Lily's ability to hold her own against that suited devil is something I admire. She really is incredibly blunt. I don't think I'll ever be able to keep up with your sister's energy. As I feel Lily's soft hand come to rest on my own, I roll my head to the side to see her gently smiling. For a long time, we simply sit beside each other silently. It is a delightful time. Given her unquestionably unusual height, she's pretty much exactly as tall as I am, which I see as a plus. Probably a couple of centimeters higher, if anything. Ooh, damn. Like this, she appears even taller. The feeling of her pale, soft hand against mine is a pleasant one, as is the sight of the thin silken pajamas she wears, showing her curves and collarbone. You do get on well, though, even if you do say that. I guess. You know, you two are a lot more alike than I first thought when I met you. Then it's a good thing I quickly stopped you from going after her, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to dwell on that. Though she jokes about it, my assessment of my inability to keep up with Akira, either physically or mentally, was quite in earnest. Lily's slow-paced and ladylike, almost motherly nature is perhaps the single thing that helped me the most in my first weeks of Yamaku. Come to think of it. Wait. Since when we're using protection? As I give a curious look to my side, Lily's cheeks puff out as she huffs at me. Unlike you, I remember. The packet is in the cupboard next to the sink. So, I'm not the only one of us that takes a pill. In hindsight, I feel rather thoughtless for not remembering it all and leaving it to Lily. I was gonna question something, but if I remember anything about questions I've already asked about that from a medical standpoint, I think that the pill does more than merely prevent pregnancy. I think it also provides some other benefit, because I was going to ask, well, why was she taking it? Was she that sure of everything working out on the trip? But no, I think it actually does something on top of everything else, I believe. I do not actually know for a fact. I am not a woman, and I do not have one to ask right here and now, nor do I truly wish to Google it. Regardless, yeah, you really should have thought further ahead there, my dude. Looking over to the cupboard she mentions, I notice again the knee-high piles of books around us that were here to the other times I'd visited. For the most part, they're lined up against the wall to give a little more room around the table. Why don't you get a bookshelf for your books? It's odd to see books just piled around, especially given that your room looks so neat and orderly otherwise. They're easier to find this way. I know exactly which pile each book is in. Wouldn't you still know that after putting each set on a different shelf? Well, that may be, but... So she's not immune to bouts of laziness after all. You have so many of them. It's kind of a shame we can't share our book sets despite both of us reading so much. She gives a short giggle. Come to think of it, why do you order your books through Yuko? Imagine there'd be plenty of sites that you could order books in Braille from, especially in English Braille. There are lots of text-to-speech programs, too. She turns her head slightly away from me, which strikes me as somewhat surprising. I'm just not all that good with computers. I'm all right with typewriters and braillers, but that's about it. And today I learned that a Braille typewriter is a brailer. Her tones almost makes me chuckle. She's a prideful person, so admitting something like that must be difficult. I mean, using a computer would be mildly difficult, being blind. So Lily's a low-tech kind of person. Again, blind. A lot of technology really benefits the sighted. Given her old-fashioned personality, it's not really a stunning surprise. I wouldn't worry about it. A lot of people aren't really that good with them, so it's not that unusual. That unusual. Oh, now she's even more depressed. Feels like I'm twisting the knife rather than healing her wounds. With a bit of squirming, I shovel my way closer to her, attentively putting one hand around her waist to hug her. I'm still not really used to this kind of physical affection, but Lily seems to like it, and that's good enough. Huzzah! Oh, dang. All right, well, they just went into it. Lily smiles as she turns to face me, a kiss being the reward for giving in to her. She draws me in, brushing my upper lip with hers before pressing against both. Every one of my senses is filled with her. All of them? That's a lot of senses. The barely perceptible scent of her hair, her taste, her tongue fleetingly touches mine, the tenderness of her lips, the image of her filling my mind, the total silence, apart from her faint breath. I can read. We may have kissed before, but even if this is more of a kiss of simple affection than anything, it's still a new and pleasant sensation. Ugh. Judging from her vivid blush as she pulls back, it's obvious she feels the same as I do. Ain't that delightful? If we're entirely alone, it still feels a little embarrassing to open up to each other this much. If we take everything day by day, I think that would be for the best. Small steps, right? Yeah, just small steps. We have plenty of time to be together, even after the school year is over. As long as we move together, I think everything will work out okay. Neither of us is going anywhere soon, after all. For now, I'm just thankful for this small moment in time we can spend together. Okay, but here's the problem, though. We're on chapter 4, and I mean, other than that heart scare, I don't really know if we really had much in the way of drama, you know? Which is worrying. I stand unmoving in the front of the door to the nurse's office for what feels like at least a dozen minutes or so. It's not like I never entered the small beige room before, nor is it because of any feeling of childlike anxiety over the visit. Maybe it's because the nurse's office is akin to a confessional, an admission that my body is flawed. The knowledge that such a fact is kept entirely confidential between the nurse and me hardly lessens the feeling. Remembering that the bell to signal the end of lunch break will again sound soon, I give a sigh and open the door. The burden will stay with me for a while longer. Hell now, if it isn't Nakai, good to see you. Or bad, I guess, considering I'm a nurse. He gives a small laugh, amused at his little joke. I find his humor lacking and somewhat off, but the fact that he can make light of such a situation is perhaps comforting, or at least distracting. His brief episode of entertainment over, he claps his hands together and gets down to business. I will let it go this one time. I take a seat as he gestures for me to do so. Wish the classrooms had seats this comfortable. I can feel my mind wandering as my eyes quickly scan the room, distracted by all the small changes since I last came. Alrighty, so what brings you here? Haven't seen you often, so I assume your health's been good so far. Well, mostly. I see. His smile drops as I trail off. I feel slightly guilty about it. It's these moments where I can't rationally call myself normal that make me so reluctant to see the nurse. They're an admission that I'm different from everyone else, and that still makes me a bit bummed. While I was on a trip during the long weekend, I had a few problems with my heart. He hums very seriously and nods as he does so, urging me to go on. I think it was as I was walking a fairly long distance. I think the right term for it is a heart flutter. I suddenly went weak at the knees and felt almost like I was having a small heart attack, but it passed in about half a minute. Even afterward, though, I felt pretty fatigued and nauseous. Not good. Not good at all. That was how many days ago exactly? Did you do anything unusual aside from exerting yourself before the episode? Were you taking your medication properly? The nurse switches from awkward jokester to serious health professional mode, rattling off questions, making notes, and calling up stuff on a computer. I tell him about my forgetting to take my pills that morning and the preceding evening. It was a stupid thing to do, but I can't change anything about it now except answer honestly and bite the bullet. His seriousness evolves into a frown, and the talk evolves into an instant checkup. Always better to be honest. I finish putting up my shirt and again get motioned to take a seat in front of the nurse. Is this the first heart problem you've had since coming to Yamaku? I've had short pains in my chest before, just a couple of times, but they were more discomfort than anything like this. He leans back in his chair, briefly resembling a white-coated Poriot, as he mulls over the mysterious case of the heart flutter. Moving his lips from side to side shows he's thinking. His non-existent mustache wiggling, he eventually comes to a conclusion. Well, you survived it. That's always on the plus side. I blink at this one, then notice the nurse wearing his gotcha face. It's actually somewhat reassuring. I don't think he would crack jokes if things were really serious, so I keep silent and take my lumps. I'll have a talk with your doctor, but right now I suspect it's simply due to physical exertion. You've been keeping up with the regular light exercise like I directed you to? I make sure to walk a reasonable amount every day. It's usually enough to work up a bit of a sweat, but then again, I'm not really as fit as I used to be. It should be enough then. The main thing to keep in mind is to do regular low-stress exercises, not short bursts of sprinting and such. Yeah, I understand. Since leaving the hospital, I've been a lot more focused on my studies, partly to take my mind off not being able to do more physical things. It's good to hear you're coping well. Sudden lifestyle changes can be hard at the best of times, so I'm pleased to hear that you sound like you have everything in order. Almost everything, that is. Nonetheless, I want to keep a close eye on you for a while, just for observation's sake. Just to make sure things aren't going downhill, you understand. And that's something I didn't really want to hear, since coming to Yamaku, all I've wanted to do is live as normal a life as possible. Good luck with that! Observation was one of the words I came to hate most during my hospital stay. For so long, I felt as if I could have just walked straight out of the hospital doors, if not for that observation the doctors wanted so dearly. Sure, should I come in more often? He checks the calendar next to his computer, which seems to inflict on him a nasty case of furrowed brow. He spins back towards me after that. Summer holidays are a bit of a pain, considering the timing. I'll check with your doctor to try and get a better handle on the situation and see how he wants to proceed, but I think you should just take things slowly and carefully for now. What you're describing doesn't immediately sound like a recurring event, but it wouldn't hurt to slow down a bit for a while just to make sure. What should I do for today? He looks over my shoulder at a clock hanging onto the door. I never had noticed it if I hadn't followed his gaze. It's nearly time for school to be over, so you may as well just leave early. Nice! He gives me a sly wink, making sure that I understand he's doing me a favor. Well, nurse's orders. Thanks. That's what I'm here for, after all. I know you may not want to hear this, but you can't ignore your condition. Don't hesitate to see me if you have any further problems, or if you just have anything you want to ask. Bye. He spins around and gets back typing on his computer in front of him. I suppose I'll just read before waiting for Lily by the gate, considering I don't have much else to do. Even as I leave, his words echo in my mind. My condition isn't something as limiting as many of the others here in Yamaku, and I don't want to burden Lily with thinking about it. If I just live life normally and avoid any short, sharp shocks, I should be okay. I won't let my condition rule me. Lily comes into view soon after the bells heralding the end of the school day ring out. She says farewell to a number of her classmates, headed in the other direction before beginning her weekly trip to the convenience store. Afternoon, Lily. The immediate warm smile and relaxed demeanor she assumes upon noticing my presence are unexpectedly welcome. Hello, Hisao. Good afternoon to you, too. She hesitates for a second, but eventually deigns to tilt her face forward and close her eyes. My lips meet hers with a measure of slight trepidation before we move off, hand in hand. The fact that we're so close in height is somewhat useful at times, there being no need for either of us to turn our head upward nor downward in order to meet the others. That's always delightful! It doesn't take too much time to leave the noise of the other students far behind us, as you do. The tapping of Lily's cane and her free hand on the sound the only sound to be heard. Silence, blissful silence, is all that greets us while we slowly walk in the setting sun's light. I think I'm coming to really like this town. The huge green hilly expanse, the trees everywhere, the somewhat rustic little buildings. So you've come to appreciate the tranquility of it as well? I think so. I came from a metropolitan city near Tokyo, so the quiet of this town really alienated me when I first arrived. After a while, it became really nice, though. I think I prefer it to the hustle and bustle of my home city now. While I preferred the quiet of such a rural town even when I first arrived, I suppose I had the advantage of growing up in a quiet area before I came. Hanako said the surroundings are very pretty, too. Lily may say such a thing quite easily, but each time she mentions how others describe sights around her as beautiful or pretty, I feel a little put off. I noticed her expression becoming one of anticipation for some questions or another. She always had a good sense for when somebody's not saying something that's on their mind, so I may as well speak up. I was wondering how to put this. Do you ever regret that you can't see what things look like for yourself? It's just something I've been thinking about. She thinks carefully for a time. Do you ever regret that you can't hear people whispering on the other side of a room? I can only speak for myself, but the fact that I can't see is the only way I've experienced life. Just as I cannot do something you can't do something that I'm capable of. The fact that the world is made for those who are sighted can be a pain sometimes, but there are many, many people who suffer much more than I because of the way the world is. Well, it does make sense, but still, it just feels kind of bad to describe something that you can't experience to you. She tilts her head quizzically, as if I'd said something that makes very little sense at all. But I can experience it. You just said yourself that you feel like you like this area because of the way the surroundings are. I like this area for the very same reason. Thanks to the fact that this is a small rustic town surrounded by trees, it gives some peace and quiet away from the din of the school and the bustle, not to mention the smells of the city. I suppose it would be much like the home she shared with Akira as well. Her outlook on it seems pretty sensible, and I'm not surprised that she got as much a better handle on her particular condition than I do on mine. Just like how her coming from a location somewhat similar to Yamaku's surroundings let her become more acclimatized, in a shorter time. Being born blind affected her stance by her own admission. I should stop being so annoyed with myself over it, but I can't shake the feeling that I've depended on Lily far too much given the circumstances most have had to deal with in Yamaku. Makes a lot of sense. You're pretty good explaining, as always. Come to think of it, where is Hanako anyway? She was with us for lunch. It seems she's busy studying. The exams are far from over, and she said she wants to do better this year than the last. While I admire her work ethic, she's been trying to give us a lot of room alone recently. She's that type of person, I think. The kind that puts others' needs above hers at every chance. She's a sweet girl, even though she so much has hurt her in the past. I don't know. I feel like it's only now that when she's less close to me than ever that she's truly finding herself. It was thanks to you that she began to become more confident after all, not me. I take my hand from hers and gently place it on her head. The important thing is that you were there for her. Can't even imagine what she'd be like without having found someone like you. That much became obvious while you were in Scotland. We're all still friends, so we've just got to have faith in her. I think she'll become a good person, and that much is thanks to you for being there for her when she most needed it, just as you were there for me. It makes me feel a bit childish when you sound so wise. Well, I try. You doing anything on the weekend by any chance? Nothing that comes to mind. Why? How about a date on Sunday? It'd be something to do besides exam preparation. Countering my rapid beating heart, she simply smiles and nods. That would be lovely. Where'd you like to go? Her face suddenly changes to one of disapproval. You can't do that, Hisao. That's cheating. Do what? A gentleman should never ask a lady where to have a date. Ah. Oh. Her smile quickly comes back, assuring me that she's far from serious. Don't worry about it. I'll think about where we could go. I'll leave it to you then. I promise to decide on the next date, though. With our plans for the weekend made, the rest of the walk down the hill continues in silence. The prospect of that lasting for any length of time, however, is shattered as I catch sight of a familiar figure waiting for us, her hand held high. Who be it? It be Akira! Yo! Akira, what the heck you doing here? Thank you. Please come again. The change in temperature as I step outside from the convenience store sends a chill up my spine. Feels like summer's starting to wind down. Looking at my side, the same feeling seems to affect Lily as well. Though unlike me, she doesn't manage to hide the fact. Something I didn't realize at first with how physically delicate she is, even compared to the likes of Hanako. If I had to describe her, I'd have to say that she reminds me of a China doll. Then Akira was here. Akira walks up behind her and gives a couple of hard pats on her shoulder, much to Lily's concentration. For her consternation? I'm not sure. For a moment, she looks as envious of my status as an only child as I am of their close relationship. They talk between themselves for a few moments as I sort out my bags. Their voice is too low for me to catch, but eventually they break off and we begin the walk back to school. It feels good to be out of that damned office. You kids don't know how good you have it here. Kids. You too, then. Kids grow up so fast nowadays. You're not old enough to say that. I don't know. Been around Hideki makes me feel damned old. He's so precocious. He reminds me of you when you were younger. He's a nice boy. It'd be a shame if Shizune comes to have too much of an influence on him. Akira gives an amused snort at her sister's antipathy, as I wish that word would stop being used. She doesn't seem to regard it as anything to make a serious fuss about, treating it more like a childhood spat. She looks over to me, apparently only just remembering that I'm here, and gives a small grin as she reaches towards her back pocket. What is it? Just a sec, let me dig it out. After quite some difficulty, she manages to retrieve her black leather wallet from her back pocket, quickly fishing out what seems to be a folded square of paper. With Lily all but unaware of what's happening, Akira unfolds the scrap and hands it to me. What's up? Oh, look at that! An old photo of what looks to be a younger Lily and Shizune operating a noodle stand with some other girl in the background. She looks vaguely familiar, but I can't quite pinpoint why. I guess that's the benefit of doing Shizune's route first, eh? Yeah, I know who that be. Fascinating. Was it Akira? Oh, what is it, Akira? I think you know. Lily mulls us over for a few moments before realization dawns on her. Akira, you really needn't. It's fine, isn't it? Besides, it's like the only photo I have of you two since you entered Yamaku, where you're not at each other's throats. I look back down at the photo in my hand. It does seem strange to see Lily and Shizune working together so diligently without any sign of animosity. If the photos of them during Yamaku's festival, that means it must have taken over about 1 or 2 years ago. In other words, the time when they were both in the student council together. Who's the girl in the back? She looks kind of familiar. Ha! I knew you wouldn't recognize her. It's Misha before she went and dyed her hair pink. That's Misha? No way. Feels extremely strange to see Misha without her so very distinctive hairstyle. Judging from Akira's tone, she doesn't take favorably to Misha's idea of fashion. I suppose the fact that just accentuates how odd the situation looks. I think they were so friendly in the past. Wish I could do something to mend their relationship. You're being very quiet, Hisao. I am doing no such thing! This feels kind of strange to see you all so friendly like this. Lily moves to say something, but stops herself. In the end, this isn't a matter for me. It's between Shizune and Lily and nobody else. Things change, unfortunately. I hand the photo back to Akira, who sighs as she folds it up and slides it back into her wallet. A little memory quietly hidden away to be pulled out again sometime later. Yeah, that they do. Initially, I think Akira's reaction to be simply in response to the situation between Lily and Shizune, but she looks oddly glum compared to what I'd expect. Lily's expression is clouded as well. What's wrong? It's just that I'll be going to Scotland fairly soon. You're leaving for Scotland again? For a long moment, Akira looks surprised. It's an ill-fitting expression for her. After a glance at Lily, she turns back to me as if she'd never done so. Yeah, in a couple of weeks I'll be leaving for Inverness to work at the company's headquarters. It's a pretty big jump in corporate position, and it's not a chance that's going to come again. So Akira's going to leave Japan on what seems to be a permanent basis. Ooh. I can't help feeling that my assumption that we could all happily while away our days having fun in this isolated little world is coming to an end. It's unsettling. I look at Lily, mildly surprised that she hasn't told me such a thing, despite usually being so forthcoming. She continues to walk with her face fixed pointedly ahead. I can't read her expression, nor can I even guess what's on her mind, which is discomforting given how it's usually easy for me to do both. It reminds me of the time when we met at the Shanghai, just before what could be called our first date. At the time, all I could do was comfort her without knowing the cause, and now feels no different. As we finally reach the school dormitories once again, there's a somewhat awkward silence. I don't think I'm the only one who feels it. See you tomorrow then, Lily. Bye, Akira. Good night, Hisao. See ya. And with that, they walk to the female dormitories. Opening the door to the male dormitories, I stop and look back at them just moments before their figures disappear behind the heavy wooden door. That was a strange moment when Akira said she was leaving. While that wasn't the first time when my thoughts regarding my new life had been called into question, it's perhaps the first time to do it, and quite so profoundly. I still don't know what to make of Akira's reaction, much less Lily's. The night's chill reminds me to get back to my room before I catch something. My bag's pulling down on my arms with seemingly redoubled weight. And nothing else, I have a date with her to set up for the weekend. I just need to stop overthinking stuff and get on with the things as they are. The exams are still ongoing, after all, and with the trimester's end and the summer holidays beginning soon, there'll be plenty to keep me busy for a while. As I give a yawn and retreat inside, my thoughts return to what Lily will decide to set as the location of our weekend rendezvous. We may never know, but given the amount of backdrops we have available to us, probably one of the cafes. That's my guess. We'll see. Oh, dang, never mind. It's fancy. I'm pretty sure this is about the last thing I had in mind when Lily said she'd decide where to have our date. No man nor woman is dressed in anything but their finest, their formality only matched by that of their surroundings. Rich red wallpaper adorns the walls of the city lights far below flickering glow. Combined with the ambient hum of quiet speech and the high-pitched clattering of cutlery and wine glasses, the mood is very formal, yet relaxed enough for me to not feel too uptight despite this being our first real date. Once we get seated, our waiter leaves to attend to others with a quick bow, after an appreciative nod from Lily. Far from depending on my help, Lily's managed to navigate herself around surprisingly easily so far, despite the unfamiliar environment. A light brush here and there, and she's generally quite deft at orienting herself as needed. Oh, lordy, Lou. My eyes look to Lily's. I can tell from her face that she's listening to her surroundings just as hard as I'm looking. Truth be told, my eyes are lingering on her each time they sweep across the room. The red... good Sam? I don't even know what that means. Dress she's wearing accentuates her figure very well and shows off her leggy. Even her hair is done up, and the scent of perfume is just as noticeable. While my black suit may be a rental, I managed to select an appropriate one. Feels surprisingly comfortable considering I've so rarely worn one, and fits the setting just as well as Lily's attire. I guess this is a new experience for both of us, huh? She turns somewhat sheepish. I've never come to a place such as this before, no. One hell of a first date, that's for sure. It's gonna be pretty hard for me to top this. A small giggle. Even now, our nervousness is dissipating. Her hand skates along the center of the table until it touches the menu, which she takes in both hands and brings to her face. Hisao? As she lowers the beige laminated sheet from below her eyes, I can see another sheepish look. I doubt asking the waiter for a menu in Braille would be productive. I can read it out for you, no problem. I take mine and give it a quick read, and my small grin faltering. Perhaps there is. What's wrong? There are quite a few items on here, and I'm not completely sure how to pronounce a couple of them. One fine cuisine after another is listed. Most may be in Japanese, but if you were in English and French, I guess it's to be expected, but I have no idea what's in some of these. Whoa, this one I recognize. Wait, hang on. You can cook that? A small giggle of amusement comes from behind the paper sheet. Well, I could read them all out, but it'd take a few hours. Is there something with some kind of fish in it? Well, let's see. No. Aren't those poisonous? No. Eat that stuff? No. Oh, here we go. Tuna salad seems to be a good bet. From the picture, it looks like it'd be pretty filling as well. That seems to be a reasonably safe option. Let's order two then. I'm pretty sure a couple of these dishes are from poisonous animals. I haven't enough deadly run-ins for now. Lily maintains a smile, but there's a distinct lack of laughter. Black humor mustn't be her cup of tea, though to be honest, I don't find it exceedingly funny either. There are certainly quite a few interesting smells wafting about. The same is true of the sights, I assume. I've never been anywhere quite like this. A fancy Japanese tea house on an occasion or two, but never anything this lavish nor European in styling. Before another word can be said, a portly waiter in a distressingly tight vest appears at our table to take our orders. Tuna salad, 2, please. I hope I didn't mess up the pronunciation of that too badly. I didn't even try. Even if I did, he doesn't show it. And may I have a glass of Chardonnay, please, says Hal. Oh, the same. As the waiter nods and leaves, I suddenly realize what I said by absent-mindedly mimicking Lily's answer. I regret it pretty quickly. Alcohol! Only a bit. The girl has an odd propensity to getting hooked on things, I swear. Surprising that they didn't ask for identification. Then again, I guess we both do look mature for our age. I'll have to take your word for it. I'll add that this isn't what I'd call the type of place to ask such things, though. Good point. We both relax a little into our seats, trying to take our minds off the choking formality of the surroundings. As soon as we do, the same waiter reappears at our table with 2 empty glasses and a bottle, the contents of which are quickly and professionally poured into the former. Oh, we fancy now. We both nod politely as he leaves. Lily takes her glass and gently moving it from side to side. The liquid inside glistens as it moves around in the glass, and I have to admit it makes me a little less regretful for ordering the same. I guess it must take effort to judge how the liquid inside is acting based only on its center of balance. Maybe it's like her origami, taking every little chance to practice her dexterity. I guess I'm not surprised that you'd know about a place like this. Those who have money would, I suppose. This reminds me of just how completely different our upbringings were. In Yamaku, it's easy to forget about social and economic disparity between students all wearing the same uniforms and living in the same dormitories. Well, Akira was the one to tell me of it. She's come here before, apparently. So that's what they were conspiring about on Friday. And you chastised me for cheating. That's not cheating, it's simply making use of personal contacts. If you say so. Still, I get the feeling that you're more familiar with this kind of restaurant than I am. She pauses a moment, a wistful look on her face before softly smiling. The compliment seems to brighten her mood. You can thank my former school for that. If I were to appear any less, they'd be gravely disappointed. She has mentioned her previous schooling before, but now I'm kind of curious. She seems to think a lot about her past, so I don't see any problem in asking. What was that like? It was a prestigious all-girls and Catholic. Oh, dang. These facts made my parents choose it for me. Many wealthy families sent their daughters there. From how it sounds, life there must have been pretty strict. I wouldn't say it was a bad experience, but you're quite right. It was very strict. Thankfully, I managed to adapt well enough and make a number of friends. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for my sister. She found the atmosphere and religious aspects suffocating and ended up leaving for a job as soon as she was able to. That's fair and dandy. I'm probably there with her on that one. She gives a small, self-deprecating chuckle. I shouldn't complain about it, though. Not many even have the chance to go to such a school. Do you resent your parents for sending you there, then leaving? She gently shakes her head. My family is highly patriarchal. My father's business always on his mind was entirely lost as to what to do with me. In the end, he made the decision that my education was of a higher priority than staying with the family. He simply did what he thought was best. To say such things so easily. What an unbelievable girl. That said, I'm a little surprised she doesn't think her blindness played any part at all, though maybe I'm being too harsh on her family. You're too kind-hearted, you know that? Most would hate their parents for something like that. Well, some do. Oblivious to my raised eyebrow, she takes a sip from her glass. I'm guessing probably Akira. The wine sips down effortlessly, her fondness for it evidently helping her deal with the flavor of alcohol. Can't say the same goes for me, still tastes like ass-flavored ass. What of yourself? What was your schooling like? Mine? Well, let's see. It was a fairly normal public school, I suppose. Maybe a bit busier than the norm. I did quite well in class and played in the soccer club. Since I'm an only child and my parents both worked a lot, I wasted most of my free time and money at the arcade with my 3 friends. No matter how much I played, though, I never did manage to beat Mai at any of those machines. Even Takumi and Shin lost to her whenever they tried. Then I'd be left trying to be a responsible adult when Shin and Mai fought. Again. Just the 4 of us, aimlessly enjoying our childhood. Those are some pretty silly times. I catch myself as I realize I'm starting to zone out. The days of my old school disappearing to the night sky and bright city lights outside the window. Lily's face is an odd mixture of curiosity and sympathy. Given her strict schooling, I suppose something like this would seem interesting, in contrast to the only life she's known. Sounds like your previous school was a lot of fun. I'm not really sure how much of it is nostalgia, but there are some nice memories. That's in the past, though. Can't go back there now, but through my accident, I found a new life I'd never have imagined leading. The peace and calm of Yamaku, a new direction for my future in science, the friendship of Shizune, Misha, and Hanako, and most of all, you. Aww. She gives a deep, genuine smile as she moves her hand towards me, her fingers just lightly searching out my face before softly caressing my cheek. Her hand reluctantly retreats after a second of warm silence, as we notice the waiter arriving with our meals. Lily does a deft job of covering her condition, except for the fact that her nod to him is slightly misaligned due to his silence. She really needs to work hard at appearing as normal as possible in public. Well, I noticed it too. I still can't quite gauge whether it's a want to not be treated differently, a slight sense of vanity, or some mixture of both. Who knows? The dish served lives up to the salad name, and the portions, pleasantly large, with sliced eggs and tomato, looks very enticing indeed. Lily takes her knife in one hand and a fork in the other, quickly getting to work on the dishes I do. It's later than when we usually have dinner, so we're both eager to dig in. My cautious skewering of leaves and vaguely meat-like squares with my fork is matched by Lily's silent and measured prodding and chewing. An occasional tap around the side of a piece of the food to work out its edges is the only giveaway to our lack of sight. I'm done with my meal in little time, Lily taking the last few bites as I sit observing her. Finished this, Al? Yeah, it was pretty nice. That much is true. Never thought a simple salad could be so tasty and filling. But then again, I suppose that's why it costs so much to eat here. Content with my appraisal and evidently agreeing, Lily gives a small nod. You know, given that's your part 4 and exotic looking and quite pretty, I'm surprised that nobody's ever confessed to you before. You're assuming nobody did. That's a bold assumption, my dude. The simple statement takes me off guard. I shouldn't be surprised, given that I was complimenting her just moments before. Really. I've received several confessions before, both in this school and my previous one. Oh my. Adolescence is a funny time. I just remember that she went to an all-girls school. Wow. Well, she do be pretty. She's kind of talking as if she's above it herself. Huh. How easily you say such a thing. Lily looks surprised for a moment before a playful smirk covers her face. Is that jealousy? What? No, it isn't. You're a bad liar, Sao. You should take that into account. Then again, I do appreciate how sincere you are, even if you don't intend to be sometimes. I think your honesty will serve you well when dealing with others. I clear my throat in mock disapproval of this whole business and try to steer the conversation elsewhere. To tell the truth, though I do prefer solitude to being surrounded by others, I don't think I can maintain a social circle like you do. She contemplates this for a moment. I don't think that's true either. I've seen how gentle and caring you are around Hanako, and you get on marvelously well with others, even those whom you hardly know. I think you're quite adept at social situations. But on that note, what of your confession, Sasao? I'm sure someone like you must have had at least one admirer. As I open my mouth to speak, I can feel my face turn slightly dour. At times like this, I secretly appreciate the fact that you can't see my expressions. Just one. Yeah, her name was Awanako. It was when she confessed to me that I had my heart attack there in the woods during winter. Lily finds herself speechless, not expecting for the topic to move into such an area. To be fair, I don't know why she would. My condition has always been something of a concern for her, something that I strive to minimize despite my body's best efforts to the contrary. Afterward, she visited me for a while when I was in the hospital. For weeks, she came in and talked. It was usually just small talk or classroom gossip, but that was enough. But eventually, she just stopped coming. She was there every day, then every other day, then once a week, then finally one day, she just stopped visiting entirely. Did you ever see her again? Wrapped in my own little world, I shake my head before remembering the futility of the gesture. I mean, I don't see any reason why we can't just be honest with her. I doubt Lily is gonna be, I doubt Lily is the type to get all angry about it. No, we can bring up the letter. That should be okay. The memory of that single letter Awanako sent me comes back to my mind. I've never been in a relationship myself, but I've always felt like honesty is the best way to go about these things. I never saw her again, but after I was sent to Yamako, she wrote me one letter. Lily's face shows an expression I know well. I've piqued her interest, and I'd be slightly offended that it's simply a matter of curiosity for her, but she's never been very good at masking her reactions. In hindsight, it really didn't say much. What was going on in my old class, how she was faring, and almost as an afterthought that it would probably be best for the both of us that we don't see each other again. After reading it, I ended up reassessing a lot of things I thought I'd managed to work out. For the most part, that letter reminded me that the world around me was still moving and just how much I'd become isolated from it. But I guess it also reminded me of what I'd lost. She gives the information some thought before her face lights up in realization. No doubt she's worked out that it was this letter which had contributed to my angst during that lunch on the rooftop. It's a rare sight to see Lily quite so lost for words. Her entire persona is a little deflated from her earlier rapt interest. As charismatic as she is, in the end, that isn't any replacement for life nor relationship experience. Perhaps it is better she sent it than not. How's that? It can be difficult to work out how best to communicate with those you haven't met in a long time, all the more so considering your separate situations. Instead of doing what was easiest, she built up the courage to talk to you one last time, not only for her sake, but, from how it sounds, for yours as well. Maybe. I don't hate her for it. Not that I really ever did, but I don't know. Probably a more non-committal answer than I should give, but it isn't without cause. I never looked at the situation from Wanako's perspective like that before. Seconds pass in silence before Lily speaks again. Moving to Yamaku must have been hard for you, having your friends and even your girlfriend taken from you for no fault of your own. Worst of it passed while I was in the hospital. When all that surrounds you is 4 white walls and a small television, your mind takes on a life of its own. It's like my old school, I guess. I just try not to dwell on what's happened and keep thinking ahead. All that reminiscing does is get me down, and it's largely thanks to you that it feels like things are finally getting back on track. That's pleasing to hear, Hisao. She lowers her face slightly, her expression pensive. I guess I went too far and embarrassed her. I suppose you went through something a bit like that bit like what I did when you entered Yamaku, right? Anyway, right? I imagine the vast majority of our school students did, after all. You said yourself that you made your friends in your old school. Can't imagine many followed you. Lily's deep smile drops. Her expression unexpectedly darkens. Even her hands retreat to her lap. After a long while, she speaks. Hisao, can you promise not to tell anyone what I'm about to? I promise. She looks slightly taken aback by my serious tone, but then relents and smiles weakly before continuing. When I moved to Yamaku, I did regret losing the friends I had made at my other school. But there was one person whom I regretted not seeing again. He was the reason I took up English as a future career. He? Well, considering she came from an all-girls school, that can't have been a schoolmate then. I rejected the confessions I'd received until then for him. Every time I improved my English skills, his praise was my most treasured reward. It's funny, isn't it? Someone like me able to boast about the people who have set eyes on me, liking someone so utterly unattainable as my tutor. It truly is the most ridiculous thing. And I'm sure that's a fairly standard thing. It's just a precocious thing. Even in middle school, I think that still counts. Did you? She quickly shakes her head from side to side. I couldn't. Even then, I knew it wasn't possible. A silence reigns over both of us. But see, there you go. Sal was honest about stuff. Lily is honest about stuff. It's all good. This does seem to explain her ardent focus on her future in teaching English, but I can't help thinking of her confession to me. She lost without ever letting her feelings be known. Did she somehow fear that would happen again, but with me? That would explain her intensity when she did so. I really don't know what to make of it. I've heard of such relationships before. Taboos born of such things as puberty and youth. The fact that she had the good judgment not to act on it, though, is heartening. I know this must sound strange, but please don't think of me. Why would I think any less of you for that? To be honest, I think he must have been a very nice person if you liked him so much. Not only that, but you stopped yourself before going too far. For a moment, she looks somewhat lost. Most unexpectedly, though, it isn't a second before she starts to laugh. The sound takes me off guard. It's not a giggle, nor a restrained chuckle, but an honest and genuine laughter. I find myself smiling, and not just at her display of relief and happiness, but for her to trust me enough to let me see this most private of secrets. It's very nice, yes. Before I realize it, I feel her palm touching my face. Her touch is gentle as ever, with her thumb slowly stroking my cheek. You're kind, Hisao. I really do love you. Seeing her face like this, with her palm gently caressing my face, I think tonight has been a wonderful night. I guess we both had pretty weird pasts, eh? I think by most standards, our present is rather odd as well. I smile and hang my head. This woman can easily run rings around me, of that I'm quite sure. I look back around the room with its continuing quiet hum of patrons. This place probably fits into the odd category, too. It is a tad overbearing. Well, that's one word for it, yes. I catch the eye of scurrying waiter, a short, scrawny guy no older than 20. Kind of reminds me of Kenji, though unlike him, the waiter isn't dressed for winter during midsummer. After a curt bow and an offer to remove our plates, Lily asks for the bill politely and softly. With expert coordination, he maneuvers around the tables, our plates in hand, to retrieve our bill. In no time, he appears through the doors, smartly handing our bill to Lily, who promptly hands it to me, causing him to raise an eyebrow, because she is a blind. As I read the small computer-printed leaflet, the cost is considerably more than I expected. Is Al? Oh, I quickly stammer out the amount, to which Lily merely nods and reaches for her purse. Giving her card to the waiter, he disappears once again. That was a disproportionately large amount of money. The statement seems to make Lily slightly uncomfortable. My family leaves me more than enough for my education. The same goes for my sister, though she dislikes being reminded of that fact. That said, I too dislike throwing money about, but this one time I think I can make an exception, just for you. Not only did you choose our date, but you paid for both of us as well. I take the bridge of my nose with my fingers. Can't believe how high you have set the bar for our next date. She gives a small giggle. I'll be looking forward to it, Hisao. The waiter reappears beside us as if by magic and hands Lily's card back to her. Evidently picking up her lack of sight, he places the card in her hand with an extra, perhaps unneeded amount of firmness to make sure of her grip. Leaving her he exercises a measure of diplomacy by keeping a neutral face despite my own expression. Clapping my hands together, I stand up from my seat in order to bring an end to our night out, and I guess also do alchemy. I don't know. Shall we be off then, milady? It's a shame that word's been tainted by the internet. Yeah, it was a perfectly okay thing to use at one point, not so much anymore. Oof. Yeah. I snap upwards out of my sheets and sit bolt upright in my bed, as if an electric shock had just run through my entire body. The night air feels cold against the sweat of my bare skin, my breathing short and rugged nearly to the point of hyperventilation. Mind racing, I bring my hand to my head in an attempt to soothe my body's panicked state. It takes me a number of seconds to realize my hand is shaking violently even as I press it against my face. More seconds pass in complete silence, my desperate attempts to subdue my body and mind slowly, thankfully, working. Gathering myself, I start taking measure of the state I'm in. Feels like I've run a marathon, every muscle feeling tensed and sweat practically pouring off of me. I carefully direct my attention to my beating chest, measuring out the rhythm in my head. Sure enough, my unreliable heart is functioning properly for once. Just, what the hell was that? A heart attack? A bad nightmare? Medicine side effects? I've heard about panic attacks, and this does seem to have all the hallmarks of one. Can't even be bothered thinking about it right now. I feel utterly exhausted, yet completely awake after this experience. I look over to the side of my bed, the pale white of the silent figure's face almost glowing in the nighttime darkness of the room. Just the sight of her is enough to calm me down significantly. Oh, that's lovely. Her graceful demeanor persists even when she's asleep, her perfectly measured breathing and gentle face making it impossible to tell whether she's awake or truly sleeping. Giving in to temptation, I delicately run my fingertips over her hand. Her skin is soft to the touch as it's always been, yet warm even in the cold night. It's times like this, silently appreciating each other's presence, that I feel we're closest. My fingers stop at her wrist and bring my hand back down to the bed beside me. I'm not entirely sure why, but as we became even closer to each other, it felt as if something grew between us. I'm not entirely sure what it is, nor whether it existed before we'd fallen in love. Everything is moving so fast. I don't mind it at all, but it feels unlike Lily to be pushing things this much. The game keeps saying things like that. Thankfully, there aren't any students milling around in the hallways at this hour of the morning, lest I be interrogated on why I'm carrying 2 plates of breakfast to my room while dressed in an obviously hastily donned uniform. That isn't to say things like this never happen, of course. A single security guard patrolling between 2 sets of bedrooms situated right next to each other is very small force compared to adolescent hormones. Come to think of it, the fact that it's Monday morning probably helps. I'm not really sure why, but Mondays seem to bother me less than they do most others. It takes a little creative use of my hands and elbow, but eventually I manage to work the door to my dormitory room open. Stepping inside, I see Lily just getting up from the bed and tiredly rubbing her eyes. She looks a mess, just like most other times I've seen her soon after she wakes. She really isn't a morning person. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. She groggily shakes her head. The morning light illuminating her makes for a very pleasant sight. It's okay. I needn't get up anyway. What time is it? I put my plate down on my desk and turn the clock around to check the time. Still early. Don't worry. There's plenty of time left before school. She sits on the side of the bed and begins to sniff the air. As she does so, I quickly move her plate away and put it on the desk beside mine. Yes, I got us some breakfast. Shower and clothes come first, though. She stands still for a moment with her chin pointed slightly out. I gladly acquiesce and press my lips to hers, savoring the soft feeling before breaking off. With a small, sweet smile, apparently quite satisfied, she slowly makes her way to the showers. I stretch to try and wake myself up a little more, briefly looking at the steaming dishes on the desk. Rice, fish, miso soup, and some vegetables. A standard breakfast for a somewhat unusual day. I grab the bottles from my desk and start taking my daily regimen of pills. Sometimes I wonder what these things are even good for, given all the troubles I've had since the initial accident. Can't even say that it doesn't hurt to take them, considering the side effects so far. Well, whatever. Doctor's orders are that I have to take them, and rationale D suggests that I'd be well-serving to trust his judgment over mine. It doesn't take long for the noise of the shower to cease. A quick one, apparently, being fine for Lily given the circumstances. Emerging from the bathroom, she looks significantly more awake, having had the chance to collect herself. Without a word, I gently take her hand in mine and guide her to my desk. Considering I don't have a table in my room, as she does, it'll have to do. Thank you, Sal. What did you prepare for breakfast? Just rice and some vegetables. Something fast. Her face lights up at the revelation. That's quite a breakfast. This is normal for you? Well, now she's just being nice. I have little doubt, considering her past, that this isn't exactly a high-class meal by her standards. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Just because we're students doesn't mean we can take it lightly. That's my belief, anyway. From others I've talked to have said I might be in the minority. I take a seat on the side of my bed and begin eating together with Lily, her chopsticks lightly tapping out the outlines of the vegetables just as I noticed her do during our date. This is quite nice, Sal. I had no idea you could cook this well. This time she is much more genuine, I can tell that much. That said, cooking really isn't anything special at all. After a bit of practice, it's pretty easy to make a simple dish. Most of the credit goes to modern technology. Still, after years of cooking for myself, I should hope so. I got bored of eating instant noodles and ordering pizza every time my parents were both working, so I taught myself how to make a few meals. I'm still trying to get the knack of it, though. You'll make a good wife someday, Sal. I take a grain of rice and place it onto my thumb before calmly taking aim and giving it a good flick. Lily jumps a little as it hits her cheek right on target. I can't help chuckling a little at her expense as she lowers her brow and tries her best to assume a harsh and serious expression. Oh, that's right. What is it? Did you have any problems sleeping last night? You seemed restless. So she was awake back then, or at least partly so. Whether it was my heart or a nightmare caused by the side effects of my medicine, the last thing I want to do for her is to be worrying her about it. The last thing I want is for her to be worrying about me even more. Even before my relationship with Lily, I'd felt my body was a drag on everything I did. My body is my burden, so as long as I'm with her, I'll continue to act as normally as possible. Well, not particularly. Is that so? That's good then. Luckily, she seems to take me at my word. Come to think of it, there was something else I wanted to ask. Oh? How should I put it? When you dream, do you see people as objects? Yes, of course. Oh. I feel a little more sheepish from that slip of the tongue, however earnest it may be. Lily looks unperturbed, though. But you don't taste, feel, nor smell things? I move to answer, but find myself stuck before thinking about it. The more I mull it over, the more I realize that her hypothesis is correct. That's true, I guess. Never looked at it that way. Are you saying that you do? For the most part, I only hear in dreams, but yes, sometimes I touch and smell things as well. I'm just asking since Akira thought it very strange that I did when I brought it up with her. If you don't either, then maybe it's due to my blindness. Well, that would make sense. You rely on your other senses more than me, so maybe that affects your dreams as well. I believe that's what I've heard for medical studies and stuff. The wonders of the human body, I guess. For the rest of the time before school, we quietly eat the hearty breakfast in front of us, exchanging a few small pieces of small talk as we do. A quick peek out the door assures nobody's looking directly at the entrance for the boys' dormitory, so we walk out when the path is clear. Weather's good today. I stretch as Lily and I make our way outside, the bright morning sun beaming down on us. By now, a few students can be seen doing the same, making their way to the main school building, either from the dorms or through the main gate. It does feel nice and warm. Our hands linked and our cane tapping the ground, we begin in earnest our trip to the school building and join the chatting throngs of students around us. This would be the last days of exams, no? Yeah. How are you going in them? Fairly well, all things considered. You seem a bit stressed by them, though. That obvious, huh? I don't think it's just the exams, though. A lot of stuff's been happening in a short amount of time, and I'm not doing that well in the humanities subject. You're doing well in science, though, aren't you? Well, it would be hard not to do well in science for me. Come to think of it, didn't you say that before you weren't very good at science and maths? She suddenly looks very sheepish, my remark no doubt hitting home. Lily's sense of pride really can be a double-edged sword. Well, aside from that, have you ever given thought to what you might do with that ability? Seems a pity to waste it. A bit, mostly at Muto's prompting. In any case, I'll probably end up doing science as a career in some form. That's good to hear, Hisao. As we enter the gardens, I suddenly receive an unsolicited pat on the back. The green-dressed culprit dances around to meet me, evidently not paying any heed to Lily at my side. Life is never-ending pain. Hey man, what's up? Haven't seen you in a while. Just been busy with the exams and stuff. Exams, schmams. A true Renaissance man needs no study to excel in such things. Kenji does strike me as the kind of person that does well in school, even if he has a horrid attendance record and poor work ethic. So I have little reason to doubt his ability. To be honest, I'm a little envious of him. Between studying for exams and my time with Lily, I've had practically no time to myself. Maybe this is a bit like how Yuko feels. Good morning, Satou. It's good to hear you're doing well. It feels slightly odd to see Lily speaking so formally. She comes to address me more casually over the months, though I have seen her speak more formally to classmates from time to time as well. Some people never change, I guess. Not that I'd say her common polite manner is a bad thing. It was one of the reasons I liked being around her to begin with, after all. Kenji seems to take a moment to work out who it is beside me and probably hasn't noticed us holding hands either. I wonder if those glasses of his actually do anything. Oh, hey Lily. Good luck on your exams too. I'll see you after school then, man. The slight edge to his voice makes me think those words were meant to be an imperative rather than a casual farewell, and I guess I'll have to smooth things over later. Sure, see ya. Kenji nods curtly and he moves to pass us, but he's too busy glaring in Lily's general direction to take notice of her cane. Before I can try to react and save the situation, Kenji trips and reflexively reaches out for a handhold. Unfortunately, said handhold turns out to be Lily's arm. Whoa! Ah! Both fall to the ground in a sprawling heap with me left feeling rather helpless. Ah, damn. Are you two okay? Kenji quickly rises up, seemingly unfazed by the accident. No problem, man. No problem. This is nothing. My body could take much worse abuse. Lily lies face down on the grass. She doesn't look hurt by the incident, more startled than anything. I move closer to offer my help. Are you all right, Lily? Hey, Satou. Kenji offers her a hand, tentatively touching hers to let her know what he's doing. He says some odious things sometimes, but I do think he may be a genuinely good person at heart. I imagine he feels pretty bad about this. To my surprise and mine, though, Lily pounds on the ground with her fist without warning. Damn it! Whoa. Kenji freezes entirely, caught by her surprise at their outburst. I'm just as shocked. Never acted like this before, not even around Shizune. Seemingly only now remembering that there are people around here, Lily slowly climbs to her feet. Her face as she does so makes me retreat a little. I only catch a glimpse of her expression before she turns away, but it's not something I'll forget soon. She showed plenty of annoyance during our classes with Shizune, but this flash of anger was something else. There's no way that this was just about this petty incident. She pauses for a moment before signing and walking on ahead. I really don't know what to make of this. I'll, talk to you later, dude. See ya. Yeah, see ya. Kenji scratches the back of his head, trying to find something to say, then shrugs and walks away, giving us a wide berth. Alright, well, credit where it's due for Kenji. He did nothing wrong this day. I quickly catch up to Lily. She turns her head a little to acknowledge my presence, but nothing else. I should probably scold her for lashing out like that, but I also don't want to get into a shouting match with her. She's still very obviously annoyed. In the end, I keep my mouth shut and wait for her to cool off. Okay. After a quiet walk in, we eventually reach the top of the third floor stairs and the junction where we part every day. I turn to Lily before she leaves. While I do like the comfortable and warm silences we usually share, this was anything but. I don't want to leave things like this. You seem quieter than usual recently. Anything wrong? She shakes her head almost automatically as if to dispel any notion that I need to worry about her. It's just the exams taking their toll. I'll be fine. I don't think that's the reason. I very nearly say so, but decide against it. There's no point trying to draw it out of her if she doesn't want to tell me, especially when she's in a foul mood like this. If you're sure, I'll see you later then. As I turn down the hall to my classroom, Lily's soft voice rings out from behind me. Hisao, yeah? I'm sorry. With that, Lily makes off down the hallway to her own classroom, her hands skating along the metal railings. I stand still and watch until she turns into her classroom and out of sight before going to my own class with a fair measure of reluctance. As usual, I'm early. Muto is fiddling with folders and papers on his desk as he prepares for the day while a handful of students mill about chatting away. While my feelings about Lily haven't dissipated, far from it, her mention of my exam performance did remind me that I have my own life's journey to attend to. After thinking about it, I have realized that I do genuinely want to pursue science in some form of as a career, rather than it simply being the path of least resistance. Until now, though, I didn't have much of an idea of where that field I wanted to go. Just science is a pretty broad category of jobs. Something Lily mentioned earlier focused my thoughts, something I'd only idly pondered about before. I had not seriously considered following this specific path. I walk up to Muto's desk, his attention too focused on preparing for the day's lessons to notice my approach. It's the same every day. Good morning. He looks up with an expression of mild surprise that's quickly replaced by his typical awkward smile. Good morning, Nakai. Can I help you? Do you mind if I ask you something? He looks down at his messy pile of books on the desk before putting down the papers in his hand and standing up with some difficulty to properly address me. That's what I'm here for, after all. Ask away. I was just wondering, what would you say is the motivation behind teaching? He thinks on this question for a few moments before responding, evidently far from having a prepared answer. If you talk to 10 different teachers, I think you'll get 10 different answers to that question. While I can only speak for myself, I'd say that I teach because, He sinks into thought again, carefully assessing the way he wishes to present his idea. Think of it this way. When you were a child, you probably played with sticks and pebbles and moving water, such as the gutter or puddles, right? Yeah, I think a lot of people do that when they're young. Well, it's not just when they're young for some, though it does take on another form. My point is, though, that when one is doing that, they're curious about how the water will flow or be changed. Everyone, even at that young age, possesses an intense wonderment about how the world around them works, even in its smallest forms. I still feel that sense of wonderment about the universe. Even just reading about new discoveries or classic experiments gives me a renewed sense of awe at how marvelous everything is, from the farthest stars to the smallest puddle. I just hope that I can give others even a small piece of that wonderment I feel. If I can do that, even if it's just for one person, I think that I can be happy as a teacher. He scratches his head as he mentally reviews what he said. I feel like I understand him better now. Even if he is awkward around others, he does have a genuine want to be around them and offer them a piece of himself that he values. What Lily told me yesterday rings in my ears. I think he'd get on well with others, huh? She always did say I was unusually curious. Sorry if that was a little meandering. Does it answer your question? It does. Thank you. I also had another question, actually. Well, what might that be? Do you have any college brochures or guides? It's about time I started getting some applications in. He nods and bends down to look inside his desk. As he does so, I notice that he's wearing a remarkably genuine smile. I don't think I've ever really seen him act this natural around others. Perhaps this isn't Muto the teacher, but rather Muto the person. Here, need any more, feel free to ask. He hands me about a half a dozen brochures and booklets of various colors and sizes, which I take eagerly. Yes, it'll be this information which I'll use to forge my own future. I think now, after all this time and all these trials, I can finally start to see the big picture of my life ahead of me. My body may be like this, but my mind is still very much able. Thank you. Muto's a good guy. But what's the deal with Lily? Is Lily okay? I have several concerns. Several concerns, one might say. I do not know what on earth is going on here, man. This is strange. That single thought has graced my mind a countless number of times since my life here began. It feels as an easy way to discard troubling question, as if simply labeling something with those 3 words will make it go away, or at least not worthy thinking about any further. My life before my heart attack feels more blurry every time I try to remember it, and my mind struggles to keep up with all the events suddenly happening around me since. I heard somewhere that this is what it feels like to be left and stranded in a country with only the most basic understandings of the local language. Indeed, when I think about it, that seems a massively apt analogy for what's happened to me. But such situations are also supposed to make you very capable in that language very fast, as you're forced to learn in order to survive. Put another way, the situation becomes sink or swim. I wonder if I've really managed to swim after all this time. The exams are stretching me out, even though they're finally coming to an end, but I have remained in Muto's favor, and I have some sort of direction for my future now. But I keep using that stupid, meaningless phrase. This is strange. It really is amazing how fast one comes to accept being surrounded by people with sometimes incredibly jarring disabilities and conditions. So much so that I really wonder why I feel so much like a foreigner. It certainly isn't for lack of socialization or friends, and I've come to know most of my classmates on first-name terms, and know a few others around the school. Whether they're missing an arm or a leg, the students here are just like anyone else of their age. I can navigate the halls that I once lost myself in with ease, and I expected to ever have, thanks to the school's logical layout, and can engage my teachers in comfortable discussion. I swirl around gently the tea in my cup, the reflected image of my face becoming distorted by the moving liquid. This is strange. I used to hate drinking tea. Maybe I'm thinking too much. The familiar sound of china rattling from a teacup touching an accompanying saucer rings out. Is something the matter? Nah, don't worry, it's nothing. I take a long sip of the tea in front of me, as the girls do. Just whirring away at the time in Lily's room, sipping tea with her aunt and Hanako. Feels familiar, almost nostalgic. So, how's your work in the newspaper club going, Hanako? I want to know too. It sounds like it would be quite interesting. Hanako's face turns down at the attention placed upon her, though her smile belays the fact that she genuinely likes being the center of interest for the two of us. It's good. I think I'm getting better at it. Naomi and a couple of her friends handle most of the jobs, getting stories and stuff. I just do the computer things, like putting the stories together and getting it printed. It's nice since I can sit and concentrate. I see Lily's low-tech nature isn't shared by Hanako. While sitting in a room compiling other people's newspaper articles into documents doesn't strike me as overly outgoing. It is heartening to see her widening her circle of friends. Baby steps, I guess. It's mostly a bit much to be expecting her to become a socialite like Lily. How are you finding Naomi? I've heard she can be quite troublesome at times. And Lily's going into her motherly mode over Hanako. Letting go of her is something she's had to learn. Hanako scratches her cheek, thinking on her answer. Naomi's nice. She's a bit loud sometimes and a bit tiring, but she's really helpful. Her friends are nice too. That's wonderful to hear, Hanako. I'm glad you found a source of such enjoyment. Lily's smile is warm and genuine, but I can sense a touch of wistfulness to it as well. Hanako seems to miss it entirely, but I don't think for a second that I'm imagining it. I suppose it's because I've slowly come to pay more and more attention to everything going on around me. With things seemingly happening faster and faster, it feels like I'll miss something if I'm not as observant as possible. With the exams, my newly found love life, trying to fit in some studying regarding my options for college and university, and my heart condition applying the brakes on everything at irritatingly random times, my brain's been in overdrive recently. Makes me appreciate the rare quiet times such as these. I guess this is why Lily came to appreciate her weekly walks to the convenience store and her tea parties with Hanako. Despite her like of being surrounded by others, they gave a moment of peace in a chaotic and busy life. Thank God the exams are over, eh? The comment draws an earnest chuckle from both of the girls. Seems like everybody's been a lot happier since the exams ended last week. So, what are you doing over the summer breaks, Hanako? I quickly count the days in my head. Today's Monday and school finishes on Saturday. 5 days to go, after all. I was thinking of traveling, just around a bit. There's a lot of places I want to see, and I think I have enough money to pay for the bus and train rides. Naomi and one of the other girls in the newspaper club said they might come along too. Dang, Hanako! Her look indicates she's given the matter quite a lot of thought. Kind of surprised that she's contemplated something like this. Seems like she's really intent on striking out on her own. Is there anywhere in particular you're thinking of going? I was thinking that Kyoto sounds nice. I think I'll try to go to a few places, though. Lily nods in approval, happy with Hanako's plans. While I cast my eyes to Lily, I refrain from asking her the same question. She's been evasive with her plans for the future for a long time now, but I never seem to get a good time to broach the subject alone with her. Every time it comes up in conversation, it feels like she's either unsure of herself or simply dodging the question. It's troubling. Be sure to call sometime while you're out and about. I gave you my number before, right? Hanako gives a quick nod, a happy smile on her face. It's strange to see how happy people seem to become when they have a goal to work towards. Yuko seemed to brighten whenever her university aspirations are brought up, and now Hanako is just the same. So why do I feel this uncertainty? And why Lily, too? Relationships really can be irritatingly troublesome sometimes. Oh, what time is it? Oh, Takes me a second to remember that Lily's clock doesn't have any visual feedback. I really should have known given how many times I've been in her room. Nonetheless, I take my watch from my bag and quickly check it, the reason for her asking becoming clear. Ooh, it's about 20 past 10. Nearly curfew. Hanako rises to her feet, dusting herself off and neating her gown after doing so. I better get going then. Good night, Lily. Miss Al. Sleep well, Hanako. See you tomorrow. With that, she walks to the door and quietly makes her exit. Silence. This seems to be happening more and more between Lily and me recently. After a few seconds, I finally find something to talk about. Oh yeah, I talked to Muto on Friday and finally checked out some guides on college and how to apply for it. Well, that's good news. If you're going to be applying for colleges, I assume you have some idea in mind of what you might do in the future. I think I've settled on becoming a science teacher. It's going to take a while to get through university and everything to be qualified, but I think it'll be worth it. Lily's face brightens considerably at the news. I suppose with her wish to become a teacher, she's delighted I'd take the same kind of path. So you decided on a career of teaching. I think that path suits you most excellently, Hisao. I smile and nod. This time, even if I know she can't see me doing so, I know she feels it. I imagine Muto would have taken to the news well. Well, that's one word for it. Hey, Lily? Yes? I know you want to be a teacher, but... For a second, I wonder whether I should really ask her the question on my mind, but that's quickly brushed aside by the fact that this is rather late to have second thoughts. Surely you don't think I'd be offended by something regarding my blindness. Her accusing tone is betrayed by her grinning face, amused at my awkwardness in raising the topic. Some things never change. Good point, I guess. I was just thinking whether or not being blind would be a hindrance, what with your ambitions to become a teacher and all. She looks mildly surprised before giving the question some thought. I refuse to think she's never actually pondered this before. I wonder. Hisao, could you close your eyes for a moment? Okay. Raising an eyebrow, I do as she requests. I have no idea what she has in mind, and my questions only increase as I peek out from one eye. Taking the black ribbon she usually wears in her hair from the cabinet beside her bed, she advances towards me while running it through her fingers to remove any hairs remaining on the piece of cloth. I suddenly click on her intentions as I feel the black stripe make contact with my face, wrapping around my head and over my eyes. What exactly is this for? It's a little test, Hisao. Since you seem to be wondering, I'll let you see things as I do for a time. Huh, so that's what this is about. To be honest, that actually sounds kind of fun. Childish and rather silly to anyone who would be watching, but a bit of silly fun never hurt anyone. I stand up with a heave, my hands quickly moving out in front of me to warn me of any obstacles. Okay, now what? Now touch me. Well, if you say though, now then. I slowly make my way forwards towards the sound of Lily's voice. My walking speed could barely even be called a shuffle, the entire experience feeling alien enough that I don't want to risk inadvertently tripping over anything, such as her table or her haphazard piles of books. Something soft yet solid brushes against my left leg. Further inspection reveals it to be Lily's bed. I move onwards, finding myself thankful that Lily's room is so neat and tidy. Even the pile of books she has are generally kept close to the wall, well out of harm's way. The hard wall pressing against my outstretched hand makes me furrow my brow in frustration. Lily, where are you? What are you doing over there? I'm over here. Lily's voice comes from the other side of the room, far from where it was before, even to my untrained ears. If she's gonna go out of her way to avoid me reaching her, then is this just a game to her? Of course it is. Compared to a life where even the concept of sight is an abstract one, a few minutes in a blindfold or nothing. I guess she's made her point. She's more than capable of navigating her room and further, and I've seen how independent she is, even when compared to many of the others in Yamaku. Well, even if this is just a game, I may as well play it wholeheartedly. With a pace much quicker than before, I move towards the source of her voice, deftly sidestepping the table in the center of her room thanks for remembering its position. I've got you now. She gives an impish giggle, one just long enough to work out that she's passing just beside me. I quickly turn around to face the new direction. That table wasn't there before! Ow, ow, ow. I slowly sit up next to the table, raising my blindfold as I rub my aching head. I give an irritated kick to the table that's sitting in front of me, where I fell. Utterly pointless, but the thing deserves it. Hisao? Lily's still standing just to my side, obviously unsure of what's befallen me. Sorry, I kind of fell over. Are you hurt? My head hurts, but I think I'm fine. I think the table moved in order to trip me over. She giggles as she walks over and takes a seat beside me, her hand resting on my own. I suppose that's the end of that, then. Yeah, I think so. But I also think I get the point, though I do wish it hadn't involved such a headache. Lily suddenly looks blank. Point? And I return an extraordinarily flat look. That was just for fun? I just thought it might ease you up a little about the subject. I seem to be tiptoeing around it after all. In regard to teaching, sight isn't that important. There are plenty of classes taught by entirely blind teachers, and more than enough resources for me to learn the subject. It's as simple as that, really. I slump my shoulders and give a snort of amusement. Yeah, I understand. I guess we'll both just have to work hard to reach our goals then. What is it? With a little hesitation, Lily pushes her forward her chin and closes her eyes in an unmistakable gesture. I accept gladly, her lips touching. As they do, I suddenly feel her hand snaking up my chest from underneath my shirt. The feeling of her hand against my bare skin is enough to make my heart suddenly accelerate. Though she's in that kind of mood again. Well, I'm hardly one to complain. She does genuinely like this, and even with all my medications, libido is thankfully still intact. I lean in to kiss further, holding her hand tightly as I feel it tracing the contours of my chest. Eventually, we break off from one another, the room silent but for our breathing. Hey, Hisao. Yeah? I don't suppose you could wear the blindfold again? Her tentative suggestion takes me by surprise. I suppose she wants to introduce me to sex through her eyes as well, or just wants to find out what I'll be doing during the act while hampered by the blindfold. Alright, we'll have fun with that, guys. With a measure of unease, tempered by curiosity, I do as she says and lower the blindfold over my eyes. The world becomes dark once again. I reflexively tense as I feel Lily's hand gently brush the side of my face, entirely unable to anticipate her touch. I really need to get more used to contact like this. Even after the weeks we've been going out, it isn't as natural for me as it is for her. Silence? Hey, Lily. Shush. I obediently follow her instructions, then quietly listen, trying to make out something, anything that's happening around me. Compared to before when I was chasing Lily, the need to carefully navigate the room's obstacles now gone. I can take my time to concentrate much harder on listening. It takes a while, but I can eventually pick out the soft sound of her breathing in the otherwise dead silent room. In, out, in, out. Measuring it against my own breathing, I realize it's definitely deeper than normal, especially for her. Oh. Another sound makes it to my ears, but one that I can't identify immediately. I think I've heard it before, but my heart skips a beat as I realize the source. My hand almost reflexively reaching out towards it. Her face feels softer than usual under my touch, her head just barely turning an acknowledgement towards the fingers on her cheek. Satou. I gulp and take a moment to try and calm down. I need all the concentration I can muster while I'm like this in order to fully take in my surroundings. After a few deep breaths, I think I've managed to collect myself. With the touch so light that it wouldn't disturb a feather, I start to move my hand down her body. And I can feel myself losing focus again, thanks to those thin silken pajamas of hers resting so perfectly over the curves of her body. If she's like this, then that means she has to be sitting against her bed and facing me. Now to continue. Alright then, this must be her hip if I just move slowly downwards. And there you go. Fried shrimp. Fried shrimp. He apparently wants more. I can feel my chest tightening as I rock back and forth frantically, both of us entirely taken with ourselves. Nothing that unusual. I just need to take deeper breaths to steady myself. This feeling is just normal. Okay. This isn't... I can't... This pain is too much. Oh, no. I stumble backwards from Lily with unseemingly haste, clumsily hitting the back of my foot against the table and falling to the ground with an unceremonious crash. Breathing wildly, I frantically scrape at the ribbon over my eyes as I lay on my back. I have to get this off. I have to get this off. For a moment, everything goes blank as the rush of newfound light assaults my eyes. My breathing slows from the brink of hyperventilation. Seconds pass, and I carefully measure out the rhythm of my heartbeats with every ounce of concentration I can muster. My heart is normal. It's back to normal. My body feels utterly bizarre as it lays dazed on the floor looking at the ceiling. The adrenaline from before is still pouring through my veins, but my mind is completely exhausted. I prop myself up as I hear Lily getting off the bed and coming towards me. Satou, are you okay? Satou! I'm fine, Lily. I'm fine. She gives a sigh of relief, her worried expression collapsing. Her face afterward is the very last I'd ever wanted to see from her. It's a face I detested when I first saw my parents in the hospital all those months ago. Pity. Lily pities me. I just close my eyes and turn away, powerless. I feel like throwing up. That's all kinds of unfortunate. I can hear the sound of Lily moving away and quickly attending to herself, the ruffling of her clothes being pulled back on after a moment of searching just barely audible. Sorry. She slowly shakes her head as she finishes buttoning up her top. Her kind smile looks so fragile, so delicate that it makes my heart sink. Approaching carefully, she feels out the edge of the low table before taking a seat next to me, putting her arms around my chest. I'm sorry, Satou. I shouldn't have pushed my desires onto you. I really don't feel like you need to be that concerned about that. You don't need to apologize. I'd normally be fine. You've seen that much before. I guess I shouldn't have tried to push myself so far. My eyelids feel heavy. Calmly sitting next to her like this is probably letting the adrenaline work itself out of my system and letting my mind relax. So that's why you never took the lead? Yeah, I guess it's a good thing you like to, huh? The joke seems to lighten her expression a little, a fact which helps let me feel less unease about my unreliable self. Lily's head comes to rest on my shoulder as I struggle to keep my eyes open. With more difficulty after each blink, I feel completely drained. It's okay, Satou. It's all okay. No sooner does she say this than a small, quiet tune escapes her lips, Entirely too tired to think, all I can do is listen to her soft humming. It's a soft, almost melancholic tune. It sounds familiar, but the more I try to remember its origin, the less I seem able to concentrate. The feeling and scent of her head gently resting on my shoulder and her warm body against my side are soothing. The soft humming of her voice, too, relaxes my mind as much as her warmth relaxes my muscles. The singular, quiet moment, after all this fracas, made me realize just how exhausted I've become. I can feel my eyelids slowly becoming heavier and heavier. Even with the chaos of before, I wish this moment would last forever. Lily and I together sharing a single solitary occasion together, just as we used to. But if that's the case, why does she feel further away than she's ever felt before? That's concerning in a lot of ways.